Gita Jayanti, Moksha Da Ekadasi, yesterday, pretty good, twice in Sanskrit and English, reciting Bhagavad-Gita, and Krishna just recited it once. The entire Bhagavad-Gita. So many of you, I'll assume most of you, if not all of you, are quite familiar with Bhagavad-Gita. But Bhagavad-Gita doesn't need an introduction. I'm used to speaking to audiences where Bhagavad-Gita needs an introduction. It's nice to give an introduction. Depending on the audience, the introduction to Bhagavad-Gita, depending upon the audience, it's wisdom literature. It's very generic. Wisdom literature. As opposed to information literature. Or as opposed to fiction literature. But knowledge that imparts that which is beyond the mind and the senses. That's pretty nice. Knowledge that's beyond the mind and senses. That's transcendence. So it's a transcendental literature, wisdom literature. And another way of describing what Bhagavad Gita is, in simple terms, depending on the audience, it's a literature that describes the yoga systems, plural. Because many people, Western people particularly, but gosh, all over the world, from my experience, it's Hatha Yoga. I learned something about what Hatha Yoga means as opposed to Ashtanga Yoga. Would you like to hear?
Yes. Yeah.
Hatha Yoga skips Yama and Niyama. And its focus is on the next two limbs of the Eightfold Path. And it focuses on asanas and pranayama. However, I heard this from a nice scholarly devotee. There's a book written some 200 years ago on just about Hatha Yoga. But there is some recommendations. It's not go to the city and go to a yoga class or sit in front of your television and practice yoga in front of the television. There are some do's. It's not the same as the Ashtanga Yoga system, but go to a secluded place, build a little cottage, and cleanliness is important, cleanliness outside so that the cleanliness inside becomes possible. So there are some do's, which imply to some do nots. But emphasis goes to the asana portion. So most people, when they hear yoga, that's what they think. So one of the book distributors locally here was saying, when we go to door and knock on doors and say, do you like the Bhagavad Gita? When we say that we're from a yoga society, people don't seem to be warm to the idea of this literature that's... So how do you introduce new people to the message of Bhagavad Gita? Well, it's wisdom literature. Sorry, Charlie. In this age of Kali, the process of accessing transcendence must be made very easy, because otherwise people won't access it. And even if it's made very easy, it's not easy to access it. Because manda sumanda matayo manda bhagyan hipantita, in the language of the Bhagavatam. People are very unfortunate for a lot of reasons. So Bhagavad Gita is a treatise on yoga systems, plural. And the starting point of Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita is our topic for this evening, or afternoon. Sankhya. So what's Sankhya? Literally, Sankhya means to count. Or there's categories of matter over here, and over there there's categories of spirit, And Sankhya is analyzing the distinction between matter and spirit, like the beginning part of the Bhagavad-Gita. You're not the body, and then who are you? You're not the body. So there's definition of what the not the body is to help us understand what the soul is. It's neither caught by weapons or moistened by water or withered by the wind. It's not destroyed. It's everlasting, eternal, and so forth. And at the end, so that's in chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita. Because prior to chapter 2, Arjuna and Krishna are discussing as friends, because that's their rasa. Arjuna is Krishna's cousin. Of course, Krishna had a number of cousins. He had a lot of cousins. But one amongst them was a very special cousin, that's Arjuna, who was particularly, as a cousin, gifted in warfare. And Krishna had a purpose in coming into this world. He discloses in the 4th chapter. And that's 3 things. Everybody knows there's 3 things. To give protection to the sadhus, to admonish the duskritis, and to restore dharma. Those 3 things. So Arjuna was going to be instrumental. Part of Krishna's plan was for Arjuna to be instrumental to admonish or destroy the duskritis. What does duskriti mean? Kriti means merit, and sukriti means using merit for a good purpose, and duskriti means using merit for a bad purpose. Just like Hiranyakashipu or Ravan or any great duskriti, they underwent great austerities for a long, long time. But what was the purpose of the austerities? To get kriti for a bad purpose. That's the duskriti person. And by that austerity or restraining of the senses, they developed some power. And they wanted to misuse the power in some bad way. Really severe austerities. Sometimes. There's one demon who wanted to kill Krishna out of revenge. So he went to South India, and for a whole year, he only ate iron filings. For a year. Yummy. So Lord Shiva came and, what would you want? He wanted some duskriti purpose. And he met his end. So, Arjuna was an instrument for Krishna's removal of the duskritis. So the Kurukshetra battle was assembled for that purpose by Krishna's arrangements. Krishna makes different arrangements. Krishna's arrangements are for these 3 purposes: satisfying and reciprocating loving dealings with his devotees, sometimes very interesting, very playful, very mischievous, very creative, very funny with his devotees. And then there's the duskritis. By his Leela Shakti, he arranges things. So Krishna has explained the beginning part of chapter 2 of Bhagavad-Gita when Arjuna surrenders to him because he doesn't know what to do. So he surrenders and asks Krishna to please, Shishya, I'm your disciple. Please give me instructions like a disciple instead of like a friend. So Krishna immediately admonishes him and begins describing Sankhya. A wise person, this is wisdom literature, a person that has wisdom doesn't lament over the temporary. And you're speaking learned words, but you're lamenting over the temporary. So guess what? It puts you in the category of a foolish person. And then after describing Sankhya, comes the verse that I wanted to discuss. Specifically, Krishna says, I've thus far described to you Sankhya. Now I'm going to describe what's the fruit of Sankhya, or what's the purpose of knowing the distinction between categories of matter and categories of spirit. What are you supposed to do with that? Like one of the questions people like to ask is if it's not in Bhagavad-Gita, can you give some practical explanation of how to live a life according to Bhagavad-Gita? Well, it starts with understanding who you are, and as well as who you're not. And then you act accordingly. That's practical. And that acting accordingly is called Buddhi Yoga. What's Buddhi Yoga? Buddhi Yoga, like Bhakti Yoga, Buddhi Yoga is where one is connecting with Krishna, because yoga means to connect, connecting with Krishna by the guidance of intelligence, buddhi, spiritual intelligence. There's material intelligence and there's spiritual intelligence. And there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of material intelligence that doesn't lead to Krishna. And then there's a very specific kind of intelligence that leads to Krishna. Krishna gives it. Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, later in chapter 10. So Krishna's saying, I'll read the translation. Thus far I've declared to you the analytical knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. Now listen to the knowledge of yoga, whereby one works without fruitive result. Works without attachment to fruitive result. Because with work, there's something. Cause and effect. The push and the pull. And the nature of Prakriti. Without attachment to the fruitive result. If there's not attachment to the fruitive result, why work? If you have buddhi, you know what the answer to that question is. If you don't have buddhi, you either don't work or you work with attachment. O son of Pritha, when you act by such intelligence, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. 2 verses later, very nice verse, very important verse, where Krishnas make a distinction between those that have buddhi and those that don't. Those that don't, they work very hard, and their intelligence is Bahu Shaka. Shaka means branch. Like there's a tree, a trunk, and there's many branches of the tree. The intelligence of those who are not fixed in buddhi, their intelligence is many branches, and they go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. They get up in the morning or make a plan for their life, and it's filled with options. Supposing there's a vacation. And so you make a number of plans. And the end goal of the plan is to become happy. And it keeps changing and changing and changing. It really doesn't turn into happiness, and so you wait for the next vacation. Anyway, Bhusha Kagyanantasya Bhutayo Vyavasayinam. Their intelligence is taken away by illusion. But those who are on the path of Buddhi Yoga, they're Vyavasayatmika Buddhir Ekeha Kunanandana. Their intelligence is very focused. They may do many, many things. Not me. People do many things. But their aim is one. And what's that one? That's Buddhi Yoga. The one is Krishna is to be pleased. That's Bhakti. They can be used interchangeably, but the terms are different because they mean specific things. Buddhi is where one is very focused, one's intelligence is very focused, the mind and senses are engaged in varieties of activities, there's one purpose. Bhakti, one purpose is to please Krishna. So, in one sense, they're changeable, in another sense, Buddhi is a subset. But to do either Buddhi or Bhakti, there has to be a preceding understanding of who you are, as opposed to who you are. Supposing you don't know who you are, you're not going to be focused. You're going to be in the Bahushaka program. So, Sankhya leads to Bhakti, the topic of this class. Sankhya, understanding what's what, has a purpose. The purpose is knowing what's what, you do that which is who you are in relation to that which everything comes from, Krishna. In Bhagavad-Gita, so I'm pausing on that point and going to go to the next point. The next point is, in Bhagavad-Gita, there's 3 primary sections where Sankhya is discussed. And all 3 of those sections have the same conclusion. Sankhya leads to Bhakti. So chapter 2, from Krishna's initial instruction through verse 38, it's Sankhya. The next section, really short. It's in chapter 7. Chapter 7, some of you like Bhagavad-Gita. I hope some of you like Bhagavad-Gita. And in chapter 7, Krishna flutes a trumpet. I've explained to you at the end of chapter 6, the topmost rung of yoga ladder. The topmost rung of yoga ladder is Bhakti. And it has 2 parts. What the body does, what the mind does. What the body does is engage always in my service. What the mind does is always fixed on me. Madhyatenantaratmana, Shraddhavan, with faith, Bhajate Yomam. You use your senses in service to the master of the senses. What the body does and what the mind does, fixed on one thing. With intelligence, Buddhi, fixed upon pleasing Krishna. In the beginning of chapter 7, Krishna goes, da, 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 da. And now I'm going to tell you how to do it. This is how, what I just said is the top, so the middle 6 chapters is how to. Devotees often like, at the end of class, how to. Read Bhagavad-Gita. Read the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad-Gita, it's all the how to is right there. And the first thing that Krishna does is he has a little Sankhya section. Short, 3 verses. There's categories of matter. He says there's 8. Everyone knows the 8. Most of us know the 8. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. That's 5. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. That's 8. And then aside from those 8, there's para prakriti. There's bhinna prakriti, separated, and prakriti. And para prakriti, that's the soul. There's categories of matter, and there's category of spirit. But there's another besides the soul, there's the supreme soul. And the third verse is, both come from me and are meant for my service. That was really short. It's short and sweet. And that's a necessary how-to item to fulfill what Krishna promises in the first verse of chapter 7. I'm going to explain to you how to execute this topmost yoga system, which is Bhakti. And there's a third section, it's much longer. Chapter 13. Some of you like to read Bhagavad-Gita. So you know 3 divisions of Bhagavad-Gita. Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga in the middle, and then there's the Jnana Yoga section, which is essentially restating what's already been stated, but with more detail. The final 6 chapters. 6 plus 6 plus 6. Usually that equals 18. 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. So the first part of the final 6 is Sankhya. And in that Sankhya section, guess what? It's matter and spirit. 3 times over. Categories of matter and spirit, categories of matter and spirit, categories of matter and spirit. It's the terminology is different, but that's the essence Prakriti and Purusha, matter and spirit. Knowledge and the object of knowledge, Jnana and Gaya, matter and spirit. So, when Krishna is presenting the categories of matter, all of a sudden it becomes 24. So somebody might be scratching, a person that's new to Bhagavad-Gita might be scratching their head and saying, which is it? Is it 8 or is it 24? There's a nice verse in the Bhagavatam where Krishna says to Uddhava, there's many other versions besides 8 and 24. Some say this, some say that, some say the other. The model can vary depending upon the scholar or the authoritative source that's presenting. What are you doing?
Not much, I'll take it.
If I was a grahastha, I wouldn't, I just like, go right over it. But when you're a sannyasi, let me share something with you. That sound vibration is meant for sannyasis. Crying of a child is especially meant for sannyasis. Because sannyasis go, I'm glad I didn't get married. You're used to it, so you hear it all the time. It's like comfort. Some of the rest of us, it's, pardon me, goes with the ashram, maybe personality too. So, Bhakti, Sankhya leads to Bhakti. Because in that chapter of Bhagavad Gita, very quickly, Krishna takes Arjuna by the hand and he's answering his questions. They're not new questions, they're just repeats and more details of the same question. Matter and spirit in their different categories. And then once you have that, what do you do with it? It's your Krishna. You connect the individual soul to the Supreme Soul. There's a verse very early in chapter 13, one of my favorite Prabhupada beds. One of the pairs of two is Prakriti and Purusha. So Prakriti, or not Prakriti and Purusha, it's Kshetra and Kshetragya. That's another. Kshetra is the field of activities, and the soul is the knower of the field of activities. So Krishna describes what's the field of activities. I can read the verse, it's a nice verse. And then Krishna says, and the soul is the knower of the field of activities. And then Krishna says, and there's one who knows all fields of activities. The word in Sanskrit is tu, tu, means and. Prabhupada's statement that I like very much, in one word, Krishna is repeated by philosophy. And in all bodies, there's also a knower of all fields of activity. There's spirit and there's matter. And the individual that doesn't know all fields of activity is meant to serve the one who does. The master and the servant relationship between the soul and Supreme Soul. And the rest of the chapter unfolds describing details of what was discussed earlier about devotional service and the nature of devotional service that's properly performed. That's Bhagavad-Gita. Sankhya leads to Bhakti. Or, yeah, Sankhya leads to Bhakti. Just in case you really like to read Prabhupada's books, and you are curious what else is there in Prabhupada's books about Sankhya, get ready for Canto 3, Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Kapila Dev, who is an incarnation of the personality Godhead, teaches Sankhya in like 6 chapters. But when the one chapter, where the whole chapter is nothing but categories of matter. Now where's that one going? That one's going to Bhakti. Details and details and details, not just listing 24, but how the 24 manifest in the world, from subtle to gross. And then you have all 24. Now that you know what all 24 are, what do? Well, Bhakti. It goes to meditation, but meditation very quickly then goes to Bhakti. He details the meditation, he details the Bhakti. 2 chapters he details the Bhakti. But the purpose of Sankhya is Bhakti. So it's nice. Once you know who you are, theoretically, what do? So theoretically, we can all agree, I would think, we wouldn't be here, we would somewhere else if we didn't agree with this one. We're spirit soul. And now, how to realize. In fact, and every moment of life, live your life in that consciousness of who you are, instead of theoretically, notionally accepting who you are, but living your life in some other way than who you really are. The fast forward is by Bhakti. And then there's this big in-between liminal space of what you know and how you live your life. And so there's the cultivation of Bhakti through sadhana and including, regularly reading Bhagavad-Gita. Somebody was sharing in one of the home gatherings during this visit here in Maryland, Virginia area. I've been reading Bhagavad-Gita for 15 years, and I don't really understand it. What do? Keep reading it. With faith, because they wouldn't be reading it for 15 years without faith. They have faith, that's clear. I mean, by their personality, their nature, they have faith. For sure. That was Prabhupada's instruction. When he gave us his books, I remember this very clearly. In the good old days, we had a morning class in Bhagavatam, an evening class in Bhagavad-Gita, and then Prabhupada, 1970, he gave us Nectar Devotion. And then we're supposed to have a 3rd class. Every day, a 3rd class after lunch. People wide awake after lunch. Nectar Devotion class. And then people would, write letters to Prabhupada about what's this, what's that. Prabhupada gave a very simple answer. If you don't understand it, read it again. And after reading again, you don't understand it, read it again. And after reading again and reading again, you still don't understand it, read it again. And that is to say, purification will come from the potency that's there in the message, even if initially you don't understand it. Because his audience, at least at that time largely, was Western audience that didn't know anything about anything. And he's introducing Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to an audience that doesn't know anything about anything. And they have questions. So just read it again. There's potency, that's the message. There's potency, even if you don't understand all that is to say about Sankhya, for example, because that's today's topic. If you don't understand about Sankhya, don't worry about it. Keep reading it. What happens through purification, this is a little testimony from somebody that's been practicing Bhakti for a few years. It starts to go inside. When it starts to go inside, then you start to see things differently, and you start to feel things differently. And that is to say, the knowledge is already inside. Yes? Yes. I'll end with this. Little Prabhupada said, although Ananda Vrindavan isn't here, she's here. But fine, now leaves the time for questions, so. Prabhupada story. I heard from Sansrup Maharaj, who was there. The first time that Prabhupada conducted kirtan at Tompkins Square Park was the result of a long stretch of time of the devotees having nice kirtan at 26 2nd Avenue. And then slowly, the devotees started dancing. And there was, you've seen videos probably, ecstatic dancing. And then one day, Ramananda asked Prabhupada, is it okay if we go outside and take this kirtan out into the public? And Prabhupada was saying, I'm just waiting for you to ask that question. But you have to get a permit because we don't want to have a problem. So they've got a permit for Tompkins Square Park from 2 to 5, 3 hours. And the devotees went from 26 2nd Avenue down to Tompkins Square Park and sat under that celebrated tree and had kirtan for 3 hours. And there was a large crowd. They'd never seen anything like this before. People were wondering, this man from Mars or what? What language does he speak? What's he going to say? Kirtan ended. Prabhupada stood. This celebrated photograph you've seen, Prabhupada with his hands folded before him, the church in the back and the tree by his side, and everyone's expecting, what's he going to say, what's he going to say? And what did Prabhupada say? Really cool. I've not come to teach you something new. I've come to remind you of that which you have forgotten. Pretty cool. I mean, imagine, close your eyes and imagine you're a world acharya, and the first time you're addressing a public audience like this, what are you going to say? That's what Prabhupada said. The message of Bhagavad-Gita is something we already know, but it's covered. Covered with what? Forgetfulness. And you can describe forgetfulness in different ways. But we're covered. The original knowledge just needs to be awakened. So part of it is removing coverings. And if you don't really immediately understand, keep hearing, because it's removing coverings. And simultaneously, it's awakening that dormant knowledge of, in its mature stage, prema, or a desire to be in service to Krishna, then keep going and keep going and keep going. Shraddha. I wish my life to be dedicated to service to God. It's there already. It's just covered. And the sound vibration has this effect. So Sankhya leads to Bhakti. Understanding who you are leads to serving the source of who you are. It's quite natural. Without it stretch, it's quite natural. So the process itself is natural. The primary medium is sound, just like our nice kirtaniers here. And the message of Bhagavad-Gita, what you did yesterday, the whole Sanskrit, the whole English Bhagavad-Gita. And even if one doesn't understand it, just keep hearing. Just this morning, I was hearing Prabhupada saying this. The reason we recite verses in the morning class, he was explaining this for about 5 minutes, is so that sound vibration, the sound vibration can enter, and if you're being attentive, it's going to have an impact, and you may remember the verse. So in the course of the day, you can remember the verse, the Sanskrit, and or the meaning. And you notice when he would give class, he'd take certain phrases and say them, 20 times. And then the phrase, if everything else doesn't stick, that sticks. And then with the phrase comes the message. That's our process. It's something we already know. We just forgot them. Quite natural and very sublime. So that's my talk on Bhagavad-Gita. Sankhya leads to Bhakti. And now we're going to go through.
Thank you, Maharaj. So questions? Comments? What questions do you have for Prabhupada Maharaj on the class today? Yes, 1 second. Yes, Mike.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have a question like on your somebody asked after 15 years of reading Bhagavad Gita I still have questions, and you said keep on reading, which I agreed.
I said some other things too.
Yeah. No, because I have my personal questions also here. So even when I am reading this one, the more I read, I'm getting more questions.
Good. Your light's on. That's good.
My brain is now divided what? I keep on questioning. No, this is not right. It's taking, yeah.
That's good. Keep going. Keep reading.
So do you think this is the right way or
Absolutely. And be inquisitive. Don't be a blind, accepting person. And, jigyasu. Now, to say this doesn't sound right is different than saying, I'm not sure. I understand this. If you're in the judgmental position saying, I'm right, and therefore this is something other than what I know, and therefore it can't be right. That's different than saying, I have such and such conception, and this seems to be in contradiction to my conception. Could you help me understand? To a teacher or to the book. And then keep reading.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Next question? We try to go ladies, men, ladies. Any ladies have a question?
All the way over.
Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj, for the wonderful class. It's a follow-up on what Prabhu was said over there, and you said keep reading. And I was wondering, because we have someone, part of our group, and that person does have questions, but lots of questions, and we try to keep answering. Then we wonder at what point do the practices come in, and how should we say that, okay, now you need to start going into the jar of honey and tasting it, instead of just trying to feel it around and keep questioning and questioning.
We all have our nature. And some people like searching with their intellect. Then that's their nature. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good. Now, your question specifically is when does the channel turn? It's different for different people. One of the things that helps the direction to move from just the intellectual approach to a devotional approach is sadhu sangha, where one can see and model oneself after sadhu. Because we take on qualities like those with whom we associate, that principle is understood. So slowly. And some people it's more quick, some people it's more slow, some people it's in between. So what point it depends on the individual and sadhu sangha that they have.
Next question from the men's side.
Oh, I want to say something more about this.
Sure.
I've had experience with somebody like that, and when the light goes on, they become a really strong devotee. Because the inquisitive spirit when it moves strongly. So if somebody's kind of stuck over here, quite okay, unless they're disrespectful to the other persons in your group. and they want to hear themselves, not hear others, and so forth and so on. But it's not bad. It depends on people. But when I've seen such people become really, really superlative devotees, I've seen some other people just stay stuck too.
Maharaj,
And Krishna.
so we talk about Sankhya philosophy leading to Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti. Prabhupada mentioned many times in the purport about don't go to the Mayavadi philosophy.
Right.
So what's the difference between the external
Well,
more
there's
details?
devotional Sankhya and there's Mayavad Sankhya. Real Sankhya is devotional. It's in Bhagavad-Gita 3 times. Kapila Dev is an incarnation. He's teaching Sankhya. He's known for teaching Sankhya, but he's not just teaching Sankhya. He's teaching Bhakti. But it's a foundation for entering properly into the realm of Bhakti. That's where he's taking his mother. He's not taking his mother into impersonalism. Or the Bhagavatam is not taking us into. But there are some persons that the door is closed. There isn't the personality of Godhead. All there is matter, the laws governing matter, and that's all there is. End of story. So in persons, they like Sankhya. And devotees aren't averse to Sankhya. It's not the be-all, end-all. But it's obviously, it's in the Bhagavatam very strongly. It's in the Bhagavad Gita significantly. So it's important. Because it leads to a proper conception of what's what. And then enter with a proper understanding, notionally at least, proper understanding of what's what. And then we can act in our relationship with Krishna.
Those people following Mayavadi philosophy, they just stop at the
They stop. The door's closed. There isn't even a door. The Prabhupada speaks of the atheist Kapila. He's not just a Mayavadi, he's an atheist. You know, and it's resting upon the Vedas. Mayavadis also emphasize the Vedas, and that section of the Vedas that deals with matter, without acknowledgement of the personality of Godhead behind matter. That's the program. Very dry. So, nothing wrong with something. It's essential, in fact, when it leads to bhakti. Someone else?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I was wondering if there are verses in the Bhagavad-Gita that you would recommend chanting as prayers, because most of the prayers that we hear about are from the Bhagavatam devotees, but certain like verses that would empower one in daily practice.
There's many. Do you want many, or you want one or two, or what do you want?
Whatever you'd love to share.
There's one that caught my attention recently. Chapter 12. Well, not jumping off the page. Yeah. Chapter 12, verse 6 and 7. Not exactly a prayer. I'll read the translation. For one who worships me, giving up all his activities unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, who has fixed his mind upon me, O son of Pritha, for him I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Now that's not exactly a prayer, but it's a declaration by Krishna, a promise by Krishna that nourishes faith. It's not so different than what he said at the end of chapter 6, but it's expanding on what he said at the end of chapter 6. At the end of chapter, towards the end of that section, chapter 12. The words that Arjuna speaks after seeing the universal form, that's nice also. Okay.
I was just saying it's related to the verse previous to it is related to your class and the connection between 5 and 6 and 7.
You want to hear that one? For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. That's the one?
Yeah, well, kind of related to the previous right.
Yes, it's definitely related to the Charles question. Looks like, looking at the hands of the clock, we have 4 minutes. Anyone else would like to contribute something to this? Over here.
I will advise Chatushloki that the 4 verses we can say that would be.
Your microphone isn't on for some reason. Microphone, I couldn't hear you, but the microphone's not on.
Whoops.
I got Chatushloki, but the rest I couldn't catch.
Yeah, I was saying that this person was asking, Mataji was asking that if they have every day
Nice
to
prayer.
read. Yeah, so the 4 verses that include every
They're
day. You know.
There's so many verses. Those are 4 very nice verses. You know what they are? 10-8. Start with 10-8 and count to 4.
Sir, what's the
No, not you. The Mataji should after that. 10-8. 10-9, 10-10, 10-11. One more over here. Over here.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Very often, when I try to talk to someone about Bhagavad-Gita, they say, "Oh, I have read it. It's okay, you know." And they will say that I have read it, and they don't understand the essence of Bhagavad-Gita. And then I invite them. I'm like, it is good to read on your own, but what personally helps me a lot is reading with devotees. Like when in association with devotees, it really helps to.
And when you say that to these people you're having conversation with, what's their reply?
One person was not interested, and I have few friends who want to read with association of devotees.
Find a teacher, because education universally is there's a teacher. Find someone, encourage them. Find someone who you can look up to, that you feel they're trustworthy persons, you have confidence in them, and they're taking this message that's matching disciplic succession, and they're a good person to learn from. And then you could ask openly, whatever you want to ask, and it's good to learn things from a teacher. That's universal. So see what happens when you say that to those people.
So Maharaj, yesterday I was reading during the temple reading, and my verse was 12.5, and one of the verses was saying that how impersonalism, approaching the impersonalism way of is not applicable to someone who has a body like embodied like us. So I'm sorry, I am not giving the correct explanation of the verse, but then I was wondering if Krishna is saying so clearly that for someone who has a body, impersonal approach is not very, it's a hard way of doing it.
Yeah.
Then why people in Mayavad, how can they interpret Bhagavad-Gita in a Mayavadi philosophy? Like Krishna is saying himself.
You know Prabhupada's answer to that? One of his answers? Supposing somebody is asked, please touch your nose. Someone goes up. Instead of. Because they don't want to take shelter of Krishna. They want something else. And they take, Bhagavad Gita has some gravity. And so they take it some other way and some other way and some other way, anything but what it says. Because their penchant is like that. Their disposition is like that. They don't want it. Very stubborn.
Yes, we want to thank His Holiness Prabhupada Maharaj